A simple bar scene makes for a quick, elegant metaphor for the dynamic between hero and villain that will play out for the rest of the story. Two characters mirror each other's actions from start to finish, but with a key difference each time. Keeping this essential dynamic in mind, this video is going to be completely breaking down One Piece's most significant and most carefully crafted villain, a character whose analysis will tell us a great deal about the true themes of the story, as well as the true nature of the final conflict that this entire narrative is building towards. What's interesting to me is that the first big Blackbeard moment in the series is meant to give us the impression that he is cut from the same cloth as Luffy, a seemingly kindred spirit. And of course, even later on, after we find out that this strange man in Jaya is in fact the same monster that Ace is hunting, we still see more and more similarities to Luffy. An unwavering belief in the power of dreams, absolute confidence in one's own luck, a willingness to always gamble on fate, the conviction that nothing in this world is impossible. Yet despite all these surface level similarities in what they believe, the one constant clear difference is their actions, and that's what we're going to be breaking down. Now to me, what makes a villain a great foil to the hero is how much you can read into the contrast between the two. How much is the author saying through their differences that the hero alone could not communicate? In this regard, Blackbeard is one of the most brilliantly written villains you will find in any work, simply based on the amount of nuance he adds to the themes of the story by showing us an alternate manifestation of the same ideals that Luffy is supposed to embody. But before getting into Luffy and Blackbeard specifically, I want to talk about a general idea that Oda stresses throughout the series, which is that there's no such thing as playing dirty when it comes to pirates. Cheating, trickery, foul play, it's all par for the course. There's no point complaining about it because in the world of pirates, fair and unfair isn't a thing. So then why is it that Blackbeard is not the man Roger is waiting for? After all, Blackbeard is a grand dreamer, he's a freedom-loving pirate, he's driven by a powerful conviction, and he's rapidly ascended to the top of the pirate world. Sure, he had to play dirty to get there, but there are no rules, so what does it matter? Well, as counterintuitive as it may seem, despite repeatedly telling us that there's no such thing as fair or unfair in the pirate world, at the same time we're constantly being shown that there is in fact a right way to do things. What Oda has characters say about the pirate world and how he actually portrays characters as good or bad are two different stories. Consider the Marineford War. Here we see one pirate put on an absolutely Herculean effort of spirit and self-sacrifice, and ultimately fail, and on the other hand we see another pirate pull off an elaborate con and cowardly ambush, and win. Yet even though Whitebeard lost and Blackbeard won, the reader comes away from the arc with tremendous respect for Whitebeard and disgust for Blackbeard. The heavy contrast between the actions of White and Black is meant to show us that even in this world of pirates there is in fact another level to all this, that it's also largely the greatness of one's spirit and the way one pushes forward in this world that makes the greats so much more than just pirates. Blackbeard can play dirty and take shortcuts to the top, and it's all fair game among pirates, but just because he wins as a pirate does not make him a king. Now similarly, think about Luffy's way of doing things, and everything we are meant to take away from that. First of all, Luffy acknowledges and even welcomes the fact that there's no such thing as fair or unfair in the pirate's world. But if we observe his fight with Katakuri, for example, what are we actually shown? Even though Luffy doesn't believe a pirate needs to fight fair, when he actually has the opportunity to cheat a little in the fight and get an advantage on his opponent, Luffy still chooses not to. He doesn't think there's anything wrong with playing dirty, but he simply prefers to win purely on his own merit and wants to actually surpass his opponent. That's always been his mentality for pretty much every fight, regardless of whether or not his opponent chooses to play fair. Similarly, Katakuri could have taken advantage of Luffy's undeserved injury, but did not want to win unless it was through his own merit. Basically, pirates have complete freedom to do as they wish, but at the same time there is a fundamental, unspoken, right way to achieve one's goals that those with strong character naturally end up choosing, and that goes beyond just fights. At every opportunity Luffy has to choose a path, he inevitably picks the harder one, the one that is more earned. Part of it is that the earned path is inherently more fun to him, but at the same time he acknowledges that when everyone is putting their lives on the line chasing a dream, there is something inherently wrong about just being handed a shortcut to victory. It's the same reason Luffy can logically understand that stealing the road poneglyph rubbings would be a valid option, but he still doesn't like it as he wants to become Pirate King by actually beating those in front of him. Of course, on the other hand, we know Blackbeard wouldn't hesitate to hear exactly what Rayleigh had to say, and we can imagine that Blackbeard is already scheming to get the poneglyph rubbings without having to go up against 2 other emperors. In the same vein, think about how Luffy and Blackbeard have gotten stronger over the course of the story. Luffy's power progression has been all about earning every bit of improvement through sweat, blood, willpower, and creativity. He gets stronger through every fight by pushing himself to the limit over and over, thinking of new ways to maximize his relatively basic Devil Fruit ability, and even devoting himself to extreme training when he had to. On the other hand, Blackbeard has improved so far by simply eating extremely powerful Devil Fruits. There's nothing earned about these abilities, he's essentially just picking up automatic video game power-ups. Even now, many expect that his last big push to full strength will come from eating a 3rd extremely overpowered fruit, rather than getting stronger through actual combat. At the end of the day, it's likely we will see Luffy with just the rubber fruit, his physical strength, and his haki prowess go up against a guy that has simply stolen a bunch of extreme superpowers. It says a lot about who they both are as people, with Luffy always making the most with what he has and developing it to the fullest, versus Blackbeard who has taken a shortcut to top-tier power. It also says a lot about who deserves to be Pirate King, and that is ultimately the point of showing us all this contrast between the two in their journey to the top. There's an important message to take away here. This is not a story about simply achieving your dreams. This is a story about earning your dreams. And so here we can see the importance of Blackbeard's character. Through him, Oda is able to make an important statement on dreams that Luffy alone could not, because Luffy is not a preachy character. It's rare for Luffy to outright talk about the idea of earning your dream, but by showing Luffy's way of doing things in contrast with another character who is clearly happy taking shortcuts to achieve his dream, and who is also clearly not deserving of said dream, we can understand that there is a right and wrong way to pursue a dream without Oda ever spelling it out for us. And that's just one statement on dreams Oda is communicating through Blackbeard. The more we look through the differences between Luffy and Blackbeard, the more we can break down even this one theme. For example, how did both characters assemble their crews? For the most part, Luffy went about collecting crew members based on how he felt about them. He was never calculating their utility, he chose them based on the type of person he found them to be. For instance, even though Sanji and Chopper both turned out to be world-class in their fields, Luffy initially wanted them to join based on their displays of character, before even trying Sanji's food or even knowing that Chopper was a doctor. On the other hand, for Blackbeard, his crewmates are chosen because they are useful pieces in making him Pirate King, and as such he wants only the best of the best. That's the whole reason so much of his plan revolved around breaking into Impel Down, specifically to recruit the strongest inmates. Whoever was the toughest would be the right fit for his crew. There was no personal connection required. In the same vein, the ships they sail in reflect a similar difference in character. Luffy's first ship was the Going Merry, a ship that was treated as part of the family, that literally grew personality and spirit of its own. Its successor was crafted with love and a dream behind it, and has a similar uniqueness and personality to it. On the other hand, Blackbeard's ship is literally a raft made out of logs, completely disposable and replaceable, purely used as a practical method of getting around. And even now that he's become an emperor with vast resources at his disposal, his fleet's ships still have no soul or sentimental qualities to them. In fact, for Blackbeard, pretty much everyone and everything he surrounds himself with is simply a means to an end. He used his original crew, the Whitebeard Pirates, till he got what he wanted and betrayed them. He used the world government for the Shichibukai status till he got what he wanted and betrayed them. Even lower level pirates who serve him are only there to help his empire grow and are easily discarded. All of which goes back to one of the oldest themes in the series, the idea of using others. Again, both Luffy and Blackbeard are driven by the same dream, and they both understand that you need others to accomplish your dream, that you can't do it alone. But for Blackbeard, that means surrounding himself with people who can be best used to achieve that dream. He wants only the most practical tools. Whereas for Luffy, he genuinely cares about the people he's recruiting to help his dream, and is even willing to put their well-being above his own dream. But of course, it's Luffy's willingness to do so that ultimately makes the people he helps want to help him achieve his dream in turn, and by doing so over and over again, he has gradually built up a massive following that is genuinely dedicated to his cause. On the flip side, just as Blackbeard views everyone he surrounds himself with as a means to an end, it is hinted that they view him the same way. If Blackbeard is not successful, then they would not be interested in following him, whereas Luffy's subordinates want to be there to pick him up when he falls. So again, Oda is making a statement on dreams through the contrast of these two characters. We are shown that even if you are chasing a huge dream, using others as tools to achieve it is not the right path and will not pay off in the long run. Rather, everyone you meet in the pursuit of your dream has their own dreams and desires, and helping them achieve theirs will in turn make them want to help you achieve yours. But wait, there's even more we can read into about the right way to pursue a dream. Again, Luffy and Blackbeard both share the same dream to become Pirate King, but for Blackbeard all that matters is that end result of actually becoming king. Everything he does follows a set plan in pursuit of that dream to the point that he was willing to waste away decades of his life as a lowly subordinate on Whitebeard's ship just to get the opportunity to start his plan. However, for Luffy, most of his decisions aren't really calculated choices to get him closer to his dream, because for him it's not just about achieving the dream. The fun of the free-flowing adventure that this quest entails is just as important. As such, while Blackbeard is following a carefully mapped out route, Luffy refuses to let anything control his route, and is willing to let the adventure take him wherever for the most part. And interestingly, while Blackbeard may believe his is the smartest, most efficient route to get to Pirate King, it's hinted that Luffy has actually been happily enjoying the very same path that the Pirate King himself once did. So in a way, Luffy is already living the dream in a way that Blackbeard never will. Essentially, what we are shown is that one character only cares about the destination, and the other is enjoying every step of the journey there. And again, this contrast can be interpreted as another statement on dreams. That what makes a dream special is not just the dream itself, but everything you get to experience in pursuit of that dream. So taking all that into account, how much does Blackbeard add to our understanding of the theme of dreams that Luffy alone can't show us? Firstly, do you even deserve to achieve your dream? Do you have the will and strength of character to truly earn every step forward without cheating or taking shortcuts? And if you do, then do you also have a kind heart that won't trample over others in pursuit of your dream, but rather help them so that they will help you in turn? And even if you are chasing your dream the right way, do you understand that your journey to achieving your dream is just as important as the dream itself? As a man who communicates more through actions than words, Luffy can only articulate the basic idea that dreams are a grand ideal worth dying for, but by contrasting Luffy with Blackbeard, we are shown all these intricacies about the right way to pursue them. And I know I've been talking primarily about the theme of dreams so far, but we can apply the same analysis to the equally important theme of freedom. In my last analysis video, I talked about the pirate's philosophy, where I discussed how being a pirate means defying all forms of authority and choosing to live freely as you please. This is a fairly controversial philosophy when you think about it, since basically at face value you could interpret this as, do whatever you want. And that certainly is how Luffy lives, but the important point here is that Luffy still has a moral code. He actually has a very strong set of morals that he lives by, even if he doesn't vocalize them that often. He has a respect for life, for people, for pride, honor, and so on. Freedom for Luffy simply means he refuses to let any authority figure tell him what he can or can't do, or what is right or wrong, but it doesn't mean he is abandoning morality, just that he wants to decide right and wrong, good or bad, for himself. Now in that same video, I talk about how an important idea stressed throughout the series is that right and wrong, justice and injustice always seems fluid and nebulous, as observant characters are quick to point out that these ideas are difficult to objectively determine, and extra observant characters point out that just or unjust has no real meaning, since whoever is the strongest gets to decide what is just or unjust for everyone else. Basically, the supposed objective definitions of right or wrong could flip on a dime once some new authority gains power. Blackbeard has seen that the world is like this, and interestingly, from this observation he has come to the conclusion that since there is no clear answer to what is justice and what is evil, there must not be any such thing. And so comparing him to Luffy, we can see that there's two very different types of freedom that these characters reflect. Luffy's freedom is not letting anyone else decide what is right or wrong for you, but rather determining that for yourself. Whereas Blackbeard's interpretation is that there is no right or wrong to begin with, and therefore he is free to do whatever he wants without any sort of moral accountability. That's why Blackbeard lives without any sense of justice or code, and that's why he's able to justify committing some of the worst crimes in the series, such as killing his crewmates. And of course, this is not the message Oda is trying to send with his pirate's philosophy. Blackbeard's way of living is a bastardization of the concept of freedom that Oda has built the series around. Essentially, at the end of the day, Luffy is meant to represent Oda's romanticized notion of what being a pirate is, refusing to bow to any sort of authority or letting any authority dictate what you can or can't do, what you should or shouldn't do, but rather being free to decide all that by yourself and then fighting for your own convictions and ideals. And on the other hand, Blackbeard represents the more classic, villainous, and honestly real version of a pirate. a degenerate criminal through and through who does whatever he wants to get what he wants without any sense of moral code. Basically, don't get the themes of the story twisted. Just because Oda can use a simple character like Luffy to put a certain ideal on a pedestal doesn't mean that the ideal is as straightforward as Luffy makes it seem. Luffy can show us a romantic vision of freedom, of the power of dreams, but Blackbeard can tell us something more, a dangerous misinterpretation of those same ideals that is just as important to understand. And so now we can see everything that Blackbeard represents and why that's important for the ideas of the story, but how does all this play into his actual role in the narrative? Many readers see him as the final boss, or at least one of the final villains, but I think most people don't truly realize the full level of symbolic significance that has been built towards the eventual clash between these two pirates, and I can promise it's a lot more than you think. Before getting into what Blackbeard's true role is, we have to quickly recap Luffy's. In my video on the Dawn in One Piece, I discussed this in depth, but in a nutshell, Oda has been gradually building up the idea that the world has been in a long night and is waiting for its dawn. It has been heavily implied that the world government, and really the celestial dragons behind them, are the darkness that the world has been suffering from, but there will come a time when certain people will come who can end their reign and bring about the dawn. Since freedom is the biggest theme in the series, the world government's reign of darkness is characterized by its suppression of freedom, and as such the sun in the series is depicted as not only the symbol of the dawn, but also the symbol of freedom and an end to oppression. Which brings us to Luffy and the crew, who are naturally the ones who are meant to bring the dawn of the world, as they are the flag bearers of freedom, which is why Luffy and his followers represent the sun throughout the story, with Luffy in particular beginning his journey on Dawn Island, and just like the sun rising in the east and sweeping across the world, bringing the light of freedom wherever he goes. The heavy implication is that his ultimate destiny is to eventually end the reign of the greater darkness that covers the world as well, birthing a new world of freedom. And if that seems like a lot of ideas all at once, I suggest checking out my video on the dawn for a more fleshed out explanation. Now if you're waiting on the dawn of a better world, what has that better world been implied to be like? Contrary to what one may think right away, Oda never pushes for a state of absolute freedom. Going back to my video on the philosophy of One Piece, one of the major ideas stressed throughout the series is that order is also necessary, since as much as Oda pushes back against authoritarianism, he also stresses that a state of anarchy would bring a level of chaos and violence that is even worse. The idealistic world we seem to be heading towards is one where order and freedom are balanced, as depicted for instance in Dressrosa prior to Doflamingo's rule. A nation where there is a king and a military, but Riku does not use violence to force his people to obey, and rather gives them a lot of autonomy in making their own decisions. But at the same time, another idea that is heavily stressed throughout the series is that in order for a better society to emerge, everything must first be reset. After all, a dawn means a new day, so in order for there to be a clean slate, a fresh start, the current order must be first torn down, which brings us back to Luffy's role as he travels throughout the world. Luffy is in many ways a destructive force. He's the sun, but also the storm. Everywhere he goes, he tears down authoritarian forces, or would-be authoritarian forces, but in doing so he allows for the people of each land to be able to rebuild a better society, built on an ideal of freedom instead. Luffy is the mechanism for this necessary reset to occur. Every place he leaves is set back to a balance of order and freedom. Drum Kingdom still has a king, but he is democratically chosen. Skypiea still has a god, but he protects the people rather than controls them, and so on. So to sum up, some of the major ideas of the story are that an ideal world would be built on a balance of both order and freedom, that the world has been in a long night under the authoritarian rule of the celestial dragons who suppress freedom, that someone must bring the dawn of a new world to bring back freedom and end the reign of the celestial dragons, and that the only way to bring about this dawn is to first reset everything by destroying the existing order. All these ideas that have been gradually built up over 1,000 chapters come together to make for a really brilliant setup, for Luffy to tear everything down and bring the dawn of the world. But there's still more to it than that, because there is this other figure that parallels Luffy's journey, someone who has the potential to do something very similar but with drastically different consequences. Now, it's been established that the great change in the world will take place once One Piece is found, and with Blackbeard seemingly destined to be an endgame candidate for One Piece, it seems that he has the same potential as Luffy to be the one who can turn the world on its head. But of course, Blackbeard is not the man Roger is waiting for. As I've talked about, Blackbeard does not represent the pure ideal of freedom the way Luffy does. Rather, he embodies all the potential evils of the pirate's philosophy. When Luffy takes down a government, he leaves behind a better society, but we've already seen a glimpse of what happens when you swap the Celestial Dragon's rule for Blackbeard's free reign. Sure, it sucks having to pay up Celestial Gold, but when the Marine's protection isn't there, the town immediately becomes a pirate's paradise under the name of Blackbeard. And if he were to tear down all authority and become king of the seas, then maybe the whole world would become one giant pirate's paradise, no rules and no moral code. As is repeatedly stressed throughout Marineford, there needs to be some order, but Blackbeard would happily plunge the world into chaos. All that matters is that he can do whatever he wants. And that's very nearly what he did at Marineford. His rampage was put on hold, but we certainly approached a scenario where Blackbeard was the one who tore down the ruling order of the world, and he still plans on coming back stronger. Really, just looking at the powers Oda gave Blackbeard, we can see what he symbolizes in a nutshell. The Yami Yami and Gura Gura fruits, darkness and destruction. Such a simple representation of how he is so similar to Luffy yet so different. The path Luffy always represents is destruction of the existing order and the dawn of something better. In contrast, Blackbeard represents the destruction of the existing order and a collapse into an even greater darkness. What's interesting is that this contrast goes back all the way to the first time we ever heard of Blackbeard, the first parallel we ever saw between Blackbeard and Luffy. In Drum Kingdom, both characters take turns doing the exact same thing. They both depose the evil king of the land. But what's interesting is that after Blackbeard ends Wapol's reign, he leaves a mess in his wake. The country is free, but not necessarily better. It has no doctors, no leader, and no name. After Luffy takes down Wapol, he leaves Drum Kingdom a much happier place, a reborn land with a brighter future. Now, of course, in this case, it's not exactly Blackbeard's fault that all the doctors left with Wapol, and Luffy didn't actively do anything to bring the doctors back, but the point here is that Oda set a symbolic precedent very early on in the story. Blackbeard toppling a government led to its nation's ruin, whereas Luffy toppling that same government led to the birth of a better nation. And so all of this goes back to the bigger picture. There is this vast authoritarian government that has ruled the entire world for centuries, and all signs point to it finally being time for it to be torn down. No matter what, the One Piece will be found soon, the Celestial Dragon's reign is going to come to an end, but the final question is, who is going to be the one to do it? That's what determines the type of era that comes after this one. Destroying the Celestial Dragon's empire could lead to the birth of a better world built on an ideal of freedom, or it could lead to an even darker world of violence, chaos, and lawlessness. Luffy, of course, represents the sun that can finally bring the world into its dawn, and Blackbeard is the alternative, the warped embodiment of freedom, the false successor to Roger, the one who would plunge the world into a greater darkness. These are likely the final two competitors for One Piece, and they represent the two possible futures for the world. As Oda spelled out for us so many chapters ago, the sun or the darkness, only one can win in the end. And while Ace had to be the sacrificial lamb for this metaphor, it's really the eventual battle between Luffy and Blackbeard that will determine what the new era will be.
If you enjoyed this video, then please like, share, and subscribe. And you can help support me making more videos like this one in the future by becoming a patron. Benefits include access to chapter reviews and voting on future video topics. I want to give special thanks to patrons Mikalawa, Simon Fines, Abdullah Al-Saud, Jade Grayson, Sebastian C., Crimson Crystal, Nicholas Tatum, Ankazar, Lorenzo Linares, Jared, Chandra 3000, Paul, Peter, Strauskin, Naklucci, Lun, Geoff Nettlekoff, Dark Eternal, Patron, Aiden Ryan, Moist Juices, Vince T, Hairbond, Bree, Ryan Garada, Michelle Dreyer, Melanie G, Schwalbe, Rob Williams, Siddharth Vadnerker, Zodek, Patrick Olund, Laura, Jacob Marn, Firefox, Wiase, Joaquim Turineas, Bartos Zawada, Rohanite, Jenan Kain, The Radiant Duke, Spike, Rainmaker, Luis Aguirre, Cliver Mort, and Amalite 2609.